All right. So,
Okay.
hello.
Hey, Sarah.
All right. So, tonight we're going to talk about the intersection of worry and faith, which I
Mhm,
find that super fascinating.
mhm.
So, I thought I will let you kick it off with your thoughts and then I will add to it as we go.
So, first, I want to use sort of set the parameters for my definition of faith. What I mean is it's a broad term, right? So it's not related specifically to your belief system. It's just whatever gives you, I mean, so it doesn't matter whether you're Catholic, you're Jew, it doesn't matter. Whatever faith that you live by and the intersection of worry and faith and how that informs how we are, the decisions we make, when we decide to make a decision, when we don't, etc. So I just wanted to first set that out. It's a very broad term for whatever it means for the listener, right? So thinking it hit me only because, it's one of the things I have always on some level struggled with, right? Growing up for me in the more Judeo-Christian faith, the idea was, you can't worry and trust God at the same time, right? So it's one or the other. And but being, how I am, I worry. I worry a lot. And I have always been that way. Less so now, but it was always part of my habit nature. And so there was always that part like, well, if you're worrying, are you trusting God? So there was always that thing in my head, playing, but I still couldn't sort of help myself from worrying. And so the idea came back to me like, how has that informed the way I have lived my life? Even up to now understanding the intersection and what that means. And the idea is, can we hold both at the same time, right? Because it's always been an or. And as you and I know from talking multiple times, um, life is always about the and, really. Trying to live life in the or, it's very hard because it's sort of like it's very confined. And either you're in this box or you're in that box. Can't be in both. And then like, oh my gosh, I can't be in both. What does that mean? And so the idea started playing, what if I accepted both at the same time? What does that mean? Right? What if I say I have faith um based on my particular belief system, but yet at times I do worry about the outcome of things, about people, situations, etc. And is it somehow saying that I don't believe in my creator because I worry?
Hmm.
Right? Because again, it's like can't worry and trust. It's one or the other. Pick it. And I think I reside in both. Right? I've tried to do the or. Right? I've tried to say, okay, stop worrying, get out the driver's seat, go for the ride. I've been getting better at that, but I realized most of my life has been at the intersection of both.
Hmm.
And I feel like most of us do experience it that way. And I just wanted to have a conversation about what would it mean to actually say, I host both at the same time?
Yeah. So it's interesting that that's the way you perceive it.
Mm-hmm.
Um, and I would have said probably before um 2022 when Dan and I went through our really challenging time.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, 2020, end of 2021, beginning of 2022. Um, and here's what I distinctly remember. I remember that when we went to PBC,
Mm-hmm.
the coaching that we did, for me, it was very emotional. And I was like, I have to figure out how to get my business to launch. Dan is older than me. And someday he's going to need me to have a more flexible work schedule. And coaching is that way I'm going to do it. And
Right.
like I was just like, oh, I cried. And I don't hardly ever
Mm-hmm.
cry. But I was like, that's super like worrying about that was super stressful for me, right? Fast forward to when we were having all those problems. And the thing that hit me was I might have worried about that, like really been worried about that for a long period of time. And now that might not even be something I have to worry about at all, because maybe Dan and I will go our separate ways.
Mm.
And I think at that time,
Mm.
because you were coaching me and, you know, we were doing the marriage counseling,
Mm.
at that time, I just had this epiphany that I'm not going to waste a lot of time worrying about stuff that might never come true.
Mm-hmm.
And I feel like because of that, I don't spend now I don't spend a lot of time worrying. Now I will think about things,
Mm-hmm.
but not obsessively.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
So when I say that, what all lands for you?
So what comes up for me was surrender, right? So the intersection of faith and worry is can be mitigated in a positive way by surrender. So if you make this choice, right? Because you made a choice to, hey, I'm just regardless of whatever comes, I will figure out a way to deal with it. Right?
Yeah.
I prefer
Yeah.
one way, but if it doesn't happen, I'm prepared to do what it takes to make it through. And when you were talking, that hit me, right? Like surrendering to the process, surrendering to whatever life presents. Um, it's not that it takes the worry, but it breaks the connection to some extent. Right? It's not as tightly wound, and you kind of create space. So
Mm-hmm.
surrender feels like it creates space between those two. So you're saying, look, I have faith, but I also trust that I have enough faith to let it play out, right? Because so this is the interesting thing. Worry is launched in you wanting a certain outcome.
Yes. Yeah. Oh yeah.
Right? So when you see that events are happening where that outcome may not arise, then, well, for me, right, I automatically went into panic mode at times, like, oh my God, this train is off track, right? The track I wanted on it's not staying on this track. And then I started, and so that kicked in worry. So, and as I'm saying this, I'm thinking about expectations, right? So I had an expectation of a certain thing unfolding a certain way. And when I start seeing that unfold and not cohesively staying together the way I wanted it, then worry kicked in. And then I had this battle between myself of, I can't worry and trust God. But the question that comes up for me is, what is the trust I'm having? In other words, is it the trust that God is going to give me what I want? Or is it the trust of rolling the dice and seeing what happens? And if I'm honest, I think the trust was, oh, I'm hoping God will give me what I want. If I'm honest with myself, like I'm being,
I think that's
so
human. I think that's very
yeah,
human.
like, yeah. So it's like, hey, I'm worried about this thing coming off track, and I'm gonna let go my worry and trust God on the condition that He fulfills this expectation I have right here. What you were presenting a minute ago was quite the opposite, which I think is what is the healthy way, which is, yes, I may have a preference, right? A or B, I have a preference. I want my marriage to, but if it doesn't, I will live with how it happens, and I will still find a way to live and find joy. And so I think that the trust in yourself to meet the moment, and this, we've talked about this.
Mm-hmm.
You don't know when the moment is going to present itself, but do I trust that I will meet the moment? And meeting this doesn't mean conquering,
Yeah.
but just that I walk through it. I walk through the storm. I walk through the uncertainty. I walk through the gray areas.
Yeah. I think that the trust, there's that saying, God doesn't give you more than you can handle.
Yes.
And I think that is true, and that we have to do a lot of internal work in order to be prepared. Because honestly, if we hadn't been coaching since 2000, so for 2 years, you and I coached once a
Right.
week, right? And we still do that, but if we hadn't have been doing that, I don't think that I would have been in a mature place to handle that, the issues with Dan, right? That was very traumatic for me. And for about a week and a half, I didn't handle it very well. I'll be totally honest. I was like a bawling, sobbing mess. And then when we had that, I still, like, this conversation is just so vivid for me. I just remember saying, I love myself.
You did. You did say, I love myself. And regardless of what happens, I love my life.
Right.
And that, right, is it. So as you were just talking, I thought about this other layer, right? That the trust is really not rooted in getting what you hope you're gonna get. The trust is rooted in you have the strength to work through it. That's what it is, right? Because when coming back to the statement about, God will never give you more than you can handle, I remember times when I felt challenged, and I would say that to myself. I really wasn't always convinced. Not that he knew how much I could handle. I didn't question that. I questioned what I could really handle it. Like,
Yeah.
you know what I mean?
Yeah.
Like he had the faith that I could, but I wasn't really sure that I had the faith that I could. And I think that it's because I didn't, now as I'm understanding it, of course at the time it was different, but I think looking back on it was, I didn't think I had the faith to accept what the answer was.
Ooh, yeah. That's the
I
challenging
think
piece.
that's the piece. That's the piece, right? Because it's not really that I couldn't handle it. I knew I could. I wasn't dying. I mean, like, I literally was not physically dying.
Yeah.
It felt like a breakup, what, but it was that, could I handle the no? Could I handle, no, this is not where I want you to go? Because I had set myself on that thing. So by releasing the desire for a particular outcome,
Yeah.
then it's not really about whether you can handle it, because releasing the desired outcome is actually putting yourself in the pathway to get the brunt of whatever it is, especially if it's not what you want.
Yeah.
At that moment.
I think the place that faith comes in there is when you release it, right? When you release whatever, you're like, oh, it has to be this, right?
Yes, yes,
And
yes.
you say, okay, I just have faith that whatever the outcome is will be in my own best interest, and it'll be in the best interest of whatever my pathway my life should be taking. And I'm trying to remember, I read something somewhere really recently that said something to that effect about it's in I'll think of it.
Right. And so and of course that's another layer, right? The idea of your highest good, and releasing and on some level saying, maybe I don't really know what my highest good is. So I'm just gonna sit back and I'm going to accept what is presented to me.
Yeah.
Because a lot of times you don't really see the Summer Street High School unless you're looking backwards. Because when you're in it, oftentimes you can't put the pieces together because all the pieces don't come together yet. Maybe the next piece will come a week from now, months, years from now. Because for me, when I reflect back, I can see it clearly. But at the time, I felt lost or confused or upset or disappointed or what have you. And it felt like it was the worst thing that was happening in that moment. It wasn't, but okay.
It still hurts. It doesn't
It
matter.
hurts.
Yeah.
Right. But and so that's why I sort of want to talk about it. So is the realization, hey, it's not really that I lacked faith, and it's not that I didn't believe that God wouldn't present me more. It was just that I was holding on so closely to the particular thing I thought I needed and wanted at that moment. And the struggle was really letting go of that desire for that thing or that situation to play out. Once you surrender that, it becomes easier, not in pain, but in acceptance. Because I feel like acceptance is what helps you keep going. Because even when the pain is there, the acceptance of, I believe that this is for my highest good, even though it hurts like hell right now.
Oh, yeah.
And later on, I will be able to see the larger picture, but I'm going to trust that this is where I'm supposed to be at this moment in time. I'm supposed to be experiencing this at this moment in time. So I feel like the trust is knowing that at some point in the future, and this is where faith is, right? That I will see why and how.
Mm. Yeah.
And so I'm trusting into my future self, right? Because there's a trust that current self is in pain and is not able to necessarily see everything and can't, because some of the things aren't going to present itself until later.
Yep.
But knowing that even if you're in the fog, it will lift at some point. And you'll see the necessariness of it.
So the two things that I jotted down while you were talking was, and I don't know if this is the right word, Rose, but it's the expectation versus the reality.
Yes.
And
yes.
I don't know if expectation is really the right word for it, but it's whatever these preconceived notions we have of how it should be, right?
I think it is expectations, and the expectation creates desire.
Yeah,
right?
which is
And
a
the
good
desire.
thing, right? We should have desires and dreams and right? But it's just, well,
It's interesting. I would have said in the past, yes, except that I think that by having an expectation or a desire, I'm locking myself in. Because I create a desire for something. So if the universe presents something else, I may not be open to seeing it.
I don't know. I feel like I'm trying to hold both. So I have a desire like of what I'm trying to bring into the reality. But I try to hold it loosely.
Well, and that's the piece, right? I think that is it, right? Like holding it, but holding it loosely, which allows flexibility, which allows you to keep like an open scope. If the desire or the expectation or the dream, whatever word you want to use, becomes too locked in, you're then unwilling to accept, because you feel that this is the road to happiness. This is the road to what you need. So when something else is presented, we tend to sort of, well, yeah, that ain't
Yeah.
it. This is it.
I lived
And
that.
so, yeah,
I so lived
I have
that.
too. I so live that too. That's why I thought this was like an interesting conversation to have.
Yeah.
So the idea is all about holding, but not too tight. The idea we talk about is attachments. If you have a light attachment, it's okay. It's when it becomes an intense attachment that then it becomes painful, because then what happens is to what you're saying, the expectation, if it's different from the reality, that's where the pain is. So the more intense the desire and the less willing you are to hold it loosely, the more pain is created when that thing doesn't surface.
Yeah. So as you were saying that, Rose, the thing that popped in my head was, how did you learn to hold it loosely?
Because the other way wasn't working. Right. I feel
Was
like
there a moment? Was there a like a aha?
there probably was. I can't recall it now. But the image I have, right? And this is the image I always hold when I feel like I'm slotting into that sort of silo situation, is I always think about, I can't remember when I was younger who said it to me, you know, like the more tightly you hold onto sand, it will fall through your fingers. But if you hold it loosely, you tend to maintain more.
Mm-hmm.
And I feel like that's the idea, like when we grasp, and that's the image that comes up for me if I feel I'm going down that path. Like holding on too tightly, I will lose it.
Yeah.
As opposed to holding it loosely and, you know, allowing it to either swim in or swim out of my life, right? Like it's like, you know, um,
It's so fascinating. Like the whole conversation is just so fascinating, right? Because what we're really playing with is the contrast of and I think it's the and, right? It's that you can hold two completely opposite things at the same time.
but just hold them loosely.
Right. Right.
Allow the and to be there, like fully, not pretend, right? Um,
I don't know. I think I pretended at first.
I thought I was doing ands too, but apparently I was doing more ors.
Yeah.
And it's been, and is something I have had to learn, because in reality we're holding things at the same time. We're happy about something, we're sad about another thing, but we're holding it all at the same time, because that's really how life is, right? Nothing is ever picture perfect. There's no such thing.
Right.
But something came up for me as we were talking about holding something loosely. So I think, and this has been for me, so I don't know if this is an experience that you've had or other people have had. There's always that sort of voice that says, well, if you don't hold it, if you hold it loosely, if you're not, if you don't hold it firm, then are you ambitious enough?
Yeah.
Right? So for instance, and I've always shared with you, I have never, and I'm not sure why this is, because I have in other areas of my life. When it comes to my profession, I've never said I want to work there or I want to live here. I've never done that. I've somehow, on some level, allowed myself to flow. And I've ended up in places I never would have imagined, but they've been awesome experiences.
Mm-hmm.
And it's interesting because in that part of my life, I hold everything very loosely. I never seek something out. And I've always wondered, am I not ambitious enough? Because other people were always focused, you know, like, hey, you know, I want to work here. I want to have this job. I want to, you know, get promoted and have their life really marked out. And I've always been like, well, you know, I don't know. And I've always felt okay with that, except at times that's been challenged. I'm like, well, am I not ambitious enough? Am I, what's going on here? Am I taking too laid back approach? Should I be more focused? Should I? And I feel like when we're talking about holding things loosely, that's a part that's always in that layer. Because when you tell someone, I'm holding life loosely, what does that mean? You don't want to advance. What do you mean? And you're like, no, it's not I don't want to advance, but I'm just open to whatever's presented. No, you need to know what, you know, and this part of society tells you you need to know all the steps. By this age, you should have accomplished that. And I think that built into that is where people get anxiety and because they feel, well, I didn't accomplish by 30, I should have done this. And then 30 came and went. You're like, oh, I didn't, that wasn't where you're supposed to be.
Yeah. So it makes me smile as you're talking through that, because I put so much pressure on myself to figure out my thing. Like it was so frustrating in school and then in high school and even in college. So many people knew exactly what path they were on and what they were going to be when they ended. And I
Mhm.
never knew it. And I put so much pressure on myself. And now it cracks me up because where I'm at now is never been even in the realm of what I thought I was going to be doing.
Right. Yeah.
And I'm super successful at it.
And
And I
super
love
happy
it.
and happy.
And I'm
Yes.
happy and I'm having an amazing
Yeah.
time.
Yeah.
And so I just think like being an artist, a teacher and a coach, like leadership stuff, that all makes sense in my realm of stuff,
Mhm.
right? But
Mhm.
being a professional artist was not even a part of that. And yet here I am. And I feel like if I would have had that path, like that thing that said, oh, I'm going to be X,
Mhm.
I wouldn't have got to something that I love. And I
Right.
wonder how many people miss the thing that
Mhm.
that would have just really
Yeah.
like fulfilled them.
Mhm.
And they could have said, hey, I'm living the life I love. And they miss it because they're like in that pathway of I have to have the next big job or I have to do whatever
Because
that
everyone else
is.
is doing that.
Right.
And they're gonna look at me and say, "What's wrong with you?" And then you'll feel sort of like an outcast, like you're outside looking in. But it's like that idea of allowing yourself to stumble upon something that you never knew that you needed, but once you got it, you realize you can't live without it.
Yeah.
Right? I mean, the idea of having both, why can't you be a painter and teach? Why is it or? Like, I feel like we are so prescribed, so indoctrinated to or. These defined lines like, hey, stay in this line, stay in this lane. You don't deviate. If you deviate, it's going to be confusion. What you're going to do? And then we start panicking. So even if our higher self sort of say, well, no, don't ask any questions. Just follow the routine. Follow the routine. And it's the strong person that can say, well, wait a minute. I don't know if I'm supposed to be swimming in this particular ocean.
Yeah.
And there's like, oh, that's just a way of you, not admitting that you're not motivated enough or you're not ambitious enough. What's wrong with you? And this idea that you can't sit and think for a moment. I remember saying to someone, a friend of mine, he was always, on the go. And I said, do you ever like that not do anything? Like, do you ever just sit down and do nothing? I mean, not watch a movie, not plot, not plan, not, and he's like, do nothing. And I'm like, yeah, not nothing, but how about you just suspend doing something? Well, I can't do that. What am I going to do with my time? I'm like, what if you just let that happen? Let that on. No, that, and then that guy said, like, I'm not a, unmotivated person. I'm an ambitious person. I can't just, and he literally said, I can't just sit and do nothing. Now, that is actually doing something, like allowing yourself to
Yeah.
breathe, like allowing yourself to anchor. How many people, and people are like, what do you mean you just, sometimes I'll tell people, I don't know, I'm just doing nothing. I'm just lazing around. I don't know. If I'm hungry, I'll eat. I just allow the day. And I get these looks like, what's wrong? You don't have a plan, or I have a structure. And I'm like,
I
no, I really don't.
Yes. Yes, Rose. You should preach this from the mountaintops. Rest and recuperation is not a bad thing.
It's
And
necessary. It
it's
is necessary.
necessary. And I think that we've been indoctrinated by
Mhm.
this Western culture of do more, do more, do more. And the more you do, the more you'll succeed.
Right.
And what I have been living the last year
Mhm.
and even more so into this year is I'm actually doing less and having even more success. And
Mhm.
I know I've been telling you about these books I've been reading, but I did go into my calendar. I blocked off 100. I figured it's like 148 days that I'm
Mhm.
not going to work this year.
Nice.
That's like half of the year almost, right? It's a large percentage. Is it what, three quarters? I'm a horrible
But
math person.
but a little more. But the time that you were able to do it, like last summer, right? That time that you had, didn't you feel like it was actually the most beneficial time you've ever spent in your life?
Yeah. So what I realized is it was really hard, first of all.
I remember.
It was really hard. And it's because of that mindset that we have, that if you're not busy, you're not ambitious. If you're not busy, you're not going to be successful.
Mhm.
And the reality is taking that time to really refresh
Mhm.
and reset and like spend time thinking and um
Breathing, like just literally
breathing.
breathing.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes.
The thing I think of is like I'm stepping off the hamster wheel. Another image is the carousel, right? I'm not on that carousel. I'm not spinning around. I'm outside and I'm looking at the carousel. This is my, hey, is this still feeling right? Is this still fulfilling me? Those questions come up when you're actually anchored in the now. Because when you're doing, you're doing for a future thing, right? You're doing it for the projection of the future. You're not doing it for you're sucking up all the now to be
Yeah.
successful later. So you're never living now.
Yeah.
When you stop, you're actually anchoring in the now. You're honoring the now, which the crazy part about this is all we really ever have, because the future
Right.
is not guaranteed.
Right. Right.
But I'm squandering the now for
Yeah.
some projected self. So I'm ignoring the current me. I'm ignoring my thoughts, my needs in this moment for some future thing that I think might make me happy, that everyone will bless and say, hey, you're doing just A-okay, because you're doing like the rest of us. Because God forbid you stop and say, hey, you guys can stay on the hamster wheel, but I'm stepping off. You're stepping off. What's wrong? And then he desires to bring you back on the hamster wheel. And it's really a struggle
It
to stand
is.
firm into your, and this kind of,
There's
it
people
feels
that I
hard
love that
as,
I have to avoid
yeah, or just
because
stand your ground, and say, you know
yeah,
what, that works for you, and if that works for you, wonderful. But
right.
me, I need to take some time out. I need to breathe. I need to recuperate. I
Yeah.
need to refresh. I need to reset, whatever.
Yeah.
And it's okay to sit with me in silence. Like I
Yeah.
like, getting accustomed to your company, because I can't imagine how I could spend time with me if I'm busy doing something.
Yeah.
So the silence and just taking a time out allows me to really not only anchor in it now, but ask the me now, what is it I need?
Yeah.
A check-in, so to speak.
Yeah. Yeah. Yes. And I think part of that check-in, which is one of the things I'm going to challenge myself with, and I challenge anybody who's listening to us to do the same, is this summer
Excuse me.
when I do take the entire month of June off. Oh my goodness. When I do that again, I actually I'm going to try my best to do 2 weeks of no technology.
Mhm.
Um, I shouldn't say no technology, no social media, that kind of stuff, because
Right,
I have to use
right,
my phone to call Dan,
right,
so he knows that I'm
right,
still alive and all that good stuff.
right.
Um, but
Transactional. You're using it for
uh,
purely
for
transactional reason,
yes, not
not to spend time in it. Yes,
right,
understand.
right. And so, because I just feel like that's a way for me to refresh my soul, to refresh the creativity,
Mhm.
to I have a couple new books of poetry that I'm going to take along and read. I'm going to take my sketchbook, but I'm not taking any canvases and paint.
Mhm.
Um, because I really do want to spend that time refreshing myself, spending time with some friends who are coming, to Florida to hang out with me. So I
Right.
can spend time building relationship, which
Mhm.
I think is super important. It's something that, interestingly enough, when I was in corporate, was not something that was important to me for my future success, because I always measured success by money.
Mhm.
And now I realize I measure success by how much do I love my life? Am
Mhm.
I better this year than I was last year? Am I more whole?
Yeah. Yeah.
And you've been a big part of that journey. Mm. So what would you advise for somebody? I know we started out, we talked about faith and worry, and now this is how
Well, it's all
conversations we
connected. It's
all
all
go on.
connected, right? I would just say, ask yourself, is it that you're really worried? What's driving your worry, right? Is it the desire for that particular outcome to be the case? Or is it a deeper worry? And it may be a deeper worry. So my offer is ask the question,
Mm.
right? Is it that I really don't know if I have the strength to do it? Or is it that I don't want to have the strength to walk away from something I had desired and thought that that's what I needed? So I say ask the questions, because I always feel like that's the starting point, right? Like, and there's no perfect question, but just ask yourself, And I think that for me, it's always been, because I may not know where I'm going, but I feel like if I'm asking the questions or I feel a little uneasy, the universe is telling me something.
Mm.
Be curious about it and ask yourself the question. And I think that, and it will roll out how it needs to for every individual, as it should. Because again, everyone's journey is unique.
Yeah.
There's no two journeys the same. And everybody's journey is the most important.